The 2000 Chart Show. The 2000 Chart Show.
Hello. Welcome to the latest edition of the 2000s Chart Show, the podcast where every week we are reliving the 40 biggest selling songs from this week 20 years ago, telling the stories of all the new entries into the UK pop music charts. Hello, I am Samuel Spencer, as ever. Forgot my own surname there. That's the sort of, on it commentary that we like to give on this show. We're talking about 2006, the pop music of late July 2006 specifically. New releases this week from McFly, trying to get their fifth number one with their sports relief single, Don't Stop Me Now and Please Please. Red Hot Chili Peppers, trying to do one better than their last single, Danny California, which made it to number 2.
Tell me, baby.
And Sean Paul, trying to continue his run as your most obnoxious straight friend's favourite song to grind against women against their will.
And it's ever gonna be the same.
All of those songs we'll be talking about in this episode. There were 12 new entries this week, which was the chart between the 23rd and the 29th of July 2006. But just to note that we're about to head into the quietest summer that I've seen on these charts so far. So 3 songs that actually entered the chart this week, we're actually going to be talking about next week. They are Tell Me Why by Supermode, Chasing Cars by Snow Patrol. Yes, that's a song that's not going to leave this show for a long time, and I'm not particularly happy about that. And Ain't No Other Man by Christina Aguilera, giving her plenty of time to somehow turn one note into a minute-long roller coaster ride of shrewish grunting. Here's what would happen if you met Christina Aguilera in 2006. You're like, oh, hey, Christina, how's it going? And she was like, you get the idea with that. Okay, let's get into the top 40, shall we? While I take a breath.
The top 40.
That, of course, means we're starting with the bargain bin. These songs that have flopped and the songs that are on the way to the top
Bargain bin.
Kicking off with a new entry at number
40.
Definitely one of the weirder curiosities that I've ever come across in doing this show for 3 and a bit years. So this is a Tiesto remix of a song from the Pirates of the Caribbean Dead Man's Chest soundtrack. At 40, a new entry, Klaus Badelt with He's a Pirate. Shiver Me Timbers, Walk the Plank, etc. Tiesto, the Dutch DJ Ties Michael Vervest, is actually 8 years away from getting his first top 10 hit, probably why he's taking these odd little gigs, like being the person to remix songs from the Pirates of the Caribbean soundtrack. Well worth buying the single of this because you get not only the Tiesto radio edit of He's a Pirate, but the Pete and Red's Jolly Roger radio edit, the Chris Josh Ship Ahoy tribal mix, and the Freesia and Lamboy tribal treasure mix. So that is good, isn't it? They've got 7 remixes commissioned of this stupid Pirates of the Caribbean theme song. What club was ever going to play any of these? The original Pirates of the Caribbean theme, written by Klaus Badelt, a composer from Frankfurt in Germany, invited to work for legendary composer Hans Zimmer's company back in 1998. My favourite of his work before Pirates of the Caribbean was that he did the soundtrack for the Samantha Mumba starring vehicle The Time Machine, which I watched a long time ago and is so funny. So it's set in like a distant future New York, but everyone has an Irish accent in it. And it seems to me that the reason was that Samantha Mumba was so bad at doing an American accent that they thought it was better to get everyone else to do an Irish accent to make her fit in rather than the other way around. Badelt, though best known for his co-producing the score to Gladiator, which I believe the Gladiator theme also got a club remix, although I believe that was unofficial, got to number 19 in May 2004. Hans Zimmer was actually asked to score the original Pirates of the Caribbean, but he was too busy working on the Tom Cruise film The Last Samurai, so he got his employee Klaus to do it. There has been speculation ever since about exactly how much work Hans Zimmer did and how much Klaus Badelt did, but this song credited to Badelt, and it's not a bad recovery seeing as the last film he worked on was Catwoman, which got him a nomination in the Stinkers Bad Movie Award for Most Intrusive Musical Score. Klaus said that he was only given 30 days to do the score, but manages at least one very iconic theme. And it's a little sneaky of Hans Zimmer, I think. This is only my reading of this. This is purely conjecture. But it really feels like he's like, oh, I'm not going to do that shitty Pirates movie. Like, that's going to be an embarrassing stain on my record. And then the first one does, like, amazingly well. And then he's like, maybe I'm going to take back the Pirates, actually, now that it's actually successful. He has said that he and Klaus wrote the themes by, quote, rolling up our sleeves, getting drunk, behaving in a debauched way, and producing the score, which gives a pirate feeling with its rising and falling in pitch, which, of course, mimics the wave-like motion of the ocean. And speaking of motion in the ocean, that's the name of the McFly album that we'll be talking about later. It's like the sea in it, moving up and down. Yeah. Got that from BBC Bite Size. I'm trying to learn about music theory, and it seems that looking at basic GCSE music theory is about the level I can understand. Hans Zimmer, not credited on this one, but will get a top 40 of his own. He is credited for the Simpsons movie track Spider Pig in August 2007. He will release his own track from the Pirates 3 soundtrack called Drink Up My Hearties Yo Ho. He'll only be able to get that to number 81. So we are starting our journey on the open waves of the top 40, but it's time to get to dry land. The dry land of George Michael with An Easier Affair.
39.
Having too much fun.
Not able to match George Michael's long list of number one hits, one of which was the 5 Live EP, which was recorded at the Freddie Mercury Memorial Concert. We'll be talking about another Queen cover later on, which is not fun for me because, as long-term listeners know, I cannot stand Queen for reasons we'll get into, but we need to talk about a song that's here at number
38.
Was originally released in February 2005, but it failed to chart on that occasion. Now it is back. Another male singer-sighter troubadour to try and come for the post-James Blunt crown, although this one has a little bit more street cred than your Paolo Nutinis and James Morrison's. This is Ray LaMontagne at 38 with his track Trouble. Ray LaMontagne, inspired to quit his job and start to follow his dream of being a singer-songwriter after waking up and his radio alarm clock playing the Stephen Stills song Treetop Flyer. Interesting to think what his career could have been like if he'd woken up and his alarm clock was playing like the cheeky song Touch My Bum. We can only speculate. So he began performing in 1999 while working as a tutor. This came after a sort of hippie-ish nomadic childhood. His parents split shortly after his birth. His mother and the young Ray drifting across America looking for work. Lots of stepfathers along the way, leading to 5 half-siblings. He started following in his mother's footsteps once he was old enough, also wandering around the US, picking up part-time jobs. By his mid-20s, he was working in a shoe factory in New Hampshire, married with 2 children, when he decided to follow the singer-songwriting dream. I decided to give myself 5 years to see if I could get an audience for my music and to tour enough without destroying things at home. So starts in 1999, and in 2004 he releases his album Trouble, which slowly but surely becomes a word-of-mouth success across the world. He was interviewed about this by the website Bluegrass Situation.
It's a one-way ticket to a...
Bluegrass Situation. Asked what his life was like before Trouble was released. We lived off the grid. I was already married for 6 or 7 years at that point. My 2 boys were 5 and 3, and we lived on a piece of land I bought in Maine. I had a small cabin on it, and we had a hand-dug well that we used for water. It was back to the land living, and that was just because I couldn't stand renting. I wanted to have my own piece of ground, but it was really hand-to-mouth, and we were broke. Someone heard me at a festival, and they gave my disc to a college friend who was in the music business. However, he would end up rejecting the first deal that he was offered because he didn't like the people that the record company sent to meet him. Only ended up signing with Chrysalis Records when he was assured that they would support him as a singer-songwriter. Initially, that was all he was going to be. A singer-songwriter for other artists, he went into the studio to record demos of some of his songs, but his record company realised they didn't really work when anyone else sang him, and really worked when Ray sang them, and so he got to release them on this album. This was his attempt at writing songs that sounded like early 60s soul songs that were very simple in structure, simple and direct in the lyric, but somehow they're really effective. Even though if you take them apart, there's not a lot of parts, they seem to last forever. And certainly, talking of long processes, his album getting into the chart was such a process. Released in 2004 but didn't enter the top 5 of the UK chart until August 2006, making him the last genuine word of mouth success before these sort of things started happening on social media rather than literally word of mouth. I guess that we could call that word of type. So as much as he seems to be sort of an independent guy who only does the things that he wants to do, he very much did get fed into the machine of the standard entertainment industry. His songs appeared on the Devil Wears Prada soundtrack, in the Amanda Bynes film She's the Man. But he has an attitude towards stardom that I think many people on this list, and many more people out in the world, could definitely learn from. I've always felt like I know who I am. I could say no to a magazine cover back then because I know that's going to be a day out of my life where I'm going to be miserable. I've never felt like anyone in the press who had a camera really cares about you as a person. They're not sensitive to you and your well-being doesn't matter to them. They're just doing their job. So I turned down all that stuff. You lose that opportunity, but I thought, well, I'll lose that opportunity true, but you know what? I've got a show tomorrow night and I'm going to sing my ass off and people are going to feel it. And if they feel it, they'll come back next time. Of course, this doesn't lend itself to continued high-level fame. And so while he's had 5 top 40 albums in the time since Trouble, nothing compares to this album, and this is his only top 40 hit. His next track, bizarrely, is called Jolene, but isn't a cover of the Dolly Parton song and can only make it to number 99. So this is the only time we'll be talking about Ray LaMontagne, but will forever have had a place in the top 40. As will another new entry at number 37. This is Bullet for My Valentine with Tears Don't Fall.
37.
This song won the Kerrang Award for Best Single in 2006, which, sure, but beaten by, I would argue, a much better selection of songs. Supermassive Black Hole by Muse, Sugar We're Going Down by Fall Out Boy, Infrared by Placebo, which will probably be my winner. Also Rooftops by Lost Prophets. Less said about that, the better. And Trivium's Dying in Your Arms, which I've never heard. But hey, maybe it's good. I had my first ever boyfriend was very into Trivium, so it's scarred territory for me. Matthew Tuck, the lead singer of Bullet for My Valentine, said of this track, "It's a weird song. On paper, it shouldn't work. It's far too long. The middle section makes no sense. The intro is all drawn out. It's a bit of a freak. But I just like to think that it comes down to people connecting with the feeling and the melodies. The chorus is an undeniable thing, and when you break songs down, that's what people come back to. It changed everything. It's just one of those wonderful moments that you can't explain. I'm very proud of it." But maybe tears should fall for Bullet for My Valentine. They will only manage one more top 40 hit after this, even though they have 6 more top 20 albums to come. I consider Bullet for My Valentine the Lost Prophets if you prefer your band not to be led by murdered sex criminals. Which, I don't want to speak for all of you, but I certainly do. They, like Lost Prophets, are from Wales, Bridgend specifically, where there's a big metal scene around this time. It's produced not only Lost Prophets and Bullet for My Valentine, but also Funeral for a Friend. Really makes me wonder why that suddenly happened. Why were there loads of Welsh bands getting into metal? And weirdly, I was watching the Harry Hill show on YouTube yesterday. He was interviewing Paul Whitehouse, who is from Wales, and his mother was an opera singer. And he was saying how he thinks that Wales sort of fosters musical talent because it has this sort of long-standing tradition of sort of Eisteddfods and miners' choirs and stuff. And so music isn't seen as this elitist thing in Wales. And so that sort of leads to it really punching above its weight in terms of music. As for Bullet for My Valentine, they credit the local music scene in Bridgend being so small that basically all of those bands were always in each other's business, and so they were sort of developing the same sound at the same time because they were just so closely working together. And they were also trying to outdo each other, so it made their songs sort of bigger, more melodic, heavier as they went. Louder Than War, the blog, also have their own theory about why particularly metal is suddenly cropping up in Wales. There's a theory that heavy metal and rock thrives in areas of heavy industry because they are unpretentious, no-nonsense genres whose percussive, aggressive sound echoes the sounds of industry. It's also because because of this musical heritage in Wales, there is a lot of pubs in which musicians can play, but they are pubs in which people want, simple sing-along melodies, and this is also a big part of the Bullet for My Valentine sound. Matt Tuck, he was actually a county-level rugby player and a national-level basketball player, but these were sidelined by his interest in music. And it's made him, by most people's accounting, a member of the most successful British metal band since Iron Maiden. But all of this screaming into the microphone is beginning to have a cost on Matt Tuck. He is developing serious vocal problems around this time. Having never been taught to sing professionally, he is doing a lot of damage to his tonsils. I'd be ill for 5 days, okay for 2 or 3, and then dying for a week. It was shit. there were serious discussions about him quitting as the singer of the band and moving to guitar before having his tonsils removed. And so there will be no more singles from the band until February 2008. This will be the first single from their most successful album by far, but whether it will be reflected in the singles chart will be something we find out then. And I know that you'll be on tenterhooks until February 2028. Can't reveal anything now. It won't be.
36.
There's a new entry for Super Mode with Tell Me Why. That's one of the songs we're going to be talking about next week. So let's keep heading up this bargain bin as there is one more new entry still to come.
35.
Kooks with Naive, 18 weeks for that. Definitely skirting the 20-week club. I think it's just going to miss out on it. I would predict that goes out of the chart next week. But still very well done for those stage school lovelies, the Kooks.
34.
We Are Your Friends, Justice versus Simeon. They have been fighting it out for a month on this chart, giving us one of the best and most unique dance songs of the 2006 year.
33.
Fill My Little World by The Feeling. That's only been on this chart for 10 weeks. I would have said it'd been on this chart for about 100 weeks. That's how it feels.
Hey, show some love.
32.
2 Lost Prophets coming out for the third or fourth time this episode already, which is great. 6 weeks Rooftops, the Liberation broadcast, has been on this chart, but it's being beaten by another hard rock song, much more my speed. Really liked this song at the time. This is a new entry at 31 for Wolfmother with Woman.
31.
Q magazine said, with guitars set to unreconstructed, this Sydney trio are the missing link between Black Sabbath and the White Stripes. Propelled by voluminously haired frontman Andrew Stockdale's guitar heroics and uncanny Jack White-alike wail, they make elemental slabs of heavy rock that have been nibbling at the blotter acid. Thankfully, a knowing sense of humour saves them from campaign for real rock style worthiness. Far from rocket science, but immense fun nonetheless. Very much inspired by the prog rock era of the early 70s, and so it is no surprise that they feel a little out of place in the 2006 singles chart. Probably not a huge surprise that this is their only appearance on that chart, but with a great song, in my opinion. In an interview with Music Radar, their lead singer Andrew Stockdale says, I was living in an abandoned warehouse in Sydney, brackets, good day mate, put another shrimp on the Barbie, etc. The artist had taken over, so I was living there and working as a photographer. One of the people I took photos of was in a band, and he asked me if I wanted to support his band. So he had all these demos of songs he wanted to make, but he didn't actually have a band, and so he quickly joined Chris Ross and Miles Heskett on bass and drums, respectively, and they became Wolfmother. Their initial work produced by Jim Diamond, the early White Stripes producer, but this produced by Dave Sardi, who is the guy you get in 2006, basically, if you want a big rock sound. He did the most recent Oasis album, Don't Believe the Truth, which gave them 2 #1 hits. He did the Jet album, which this is an absolute cousin to. And last week, we talked about his work for the Dirty Pretty Things. Andrew Stockdale says this song is inspired by his girlfriend and his love of living in Sydney. Will win a Grammy Award for Best Hard Rock Performance. Not that this is enough to keep the band together. In August 2008, both Heskett and Ross will leave the band after non-stop touring throughout 2006 and 2007. And there's absolutely no love lost between those members when the official statement is released. Wolfmother has announced the resignation of bass keyboard player Chris Ross and drummer Miles Hesketh effective immediately. Singer-guitarist Andrew Stockdale now plans to find other musicians over coming months and to then begin making another Wolfmother album. At a headlining slot last Sunday at the Splendour in the Grass Festival in Australia's Byron Bay, rumours circulated about possible lineup changes. Following that show, Chris Ross decided to announce that he was leaving the band due to irreconcilable personal and musical differences. Miles Hesketh has also decided to leave the band rather than continuing as part of a changed lineup. The pair have been working together on songs for some time and they plan to focus their energies on that new project in the future. Andrew Stockdale, Miles Heskett and Chris Ross will make no public statements at this time. In the meantime, they simply ask all Wolfmother fans to please understand that in spite of their best efforts over a long period of time, they could just not find a harmonious way to work together, and this has led to the decisions announced today. So that is the end of Wolfmother, giving us one pretty good album and one great song in the form of Woman here at number 31. I said this was the last song in this bargain bin, but that was an absolutely massive lie because there's a great song here at number
30.
Franz Ferdinand, Keep releasing singles, even though it seems that less and less people care, except for me, who was increasingly obsessed with them in 2006. And I think this is a beautiful song showing a softer side to the band at 30. Franz Ferdinand with Eleanor, Put Your Boots On.
I could be there when you land.
They face a bit of a problem. I think this is their fourth single from this album. Do You Want To, Walk Away, The Fallen, and this. And so they have a problem that you often have if you're releasing a third or fourth single, which is the fact that most of your fans have already bought the album by this point, so why would they buy the single? And so their solution to it is to re-record the album version into a new version for the single. And I would say ruin it by taking gentle, acoustic, almost folky number from Franz Ferdinand and turning it into what I can only describe as if the choral had a hoedown throwdown. And I think this actually speaks to a huge problem that Franz Ferdinand are increasingly going to have, is they keep overworking their tracks until they sort of collapse under their own weight. I think this is a definite problem that they will have with their next album, Tonight. But that will be sometime in the future. This will be the last Franz Ferdinand release for 2.5 years. They decide to take some time off before recording their new album, seeing as they had basically recorded their first two albums back to back and toured until it exhausted them. But they go into the studio to start working on their third album in early 2007. The initial plan was to work with Brian Higgins, the leader of the Girls Aloud production geniuses Xenomania, of whom the Franz Ferdinand drummer Paul Thompson said, "We worked with Higgins for a while. Initially we thought we'd work more with him, but it didn't really work out. We just realised that we're not really a pop group." And I can understand that because Brian Higgins' way of working is very singular. They sort of don't write songs like from beginning to end. They will write like hundreds of chunks of songs and then sort of like jam them together. And I think if you're used to writing in a sort of more standard way as a rock band, this is a very difficult process for you. They had written 8 songs for this new album by this point, but then they decided to abandon them all, deciding they want a completely different sound for their third album. Alice Kapranos saying, "This time we wanted to spend more time developing and also, I suppose, allowing songs and sounds to evolve more before we ended up writing an album and absorbing more music and ideas and I suppose life itself." And when I say life, I mean life off the road, because I wouldn't classify life on the road as real life. And I think that's actually a huge mistake. It ends up with their third album sounding incredibly overworked, as we'll discover when the first single from that album, Ulysses, comes out, I believe in either late 2008 or early 2009. But for now, let's talk about this track, shall we? Eleanor, Put Your Boots On. The Eleanor of the title is Eleanor Friedberger, the lead singer of indie rock band The Fiery Furnaces, who were Franz Ferdinand's support act at this time and also Alex Kapranos' girlfriend. This is a song I think it might be time to impose a new 2000s chart show chart rule. We haven't had one for a while. This is going to be Rule 34. So this is a song about long-distance relationships. Eleanor, put those boots back on, kick the heels into the Brooklyn dirt. I know it isn't dignified to run, but if you run, you can run to the Coney Island roller coaster, ride to the highest point and leap across the filthy water, leap until the Gulf Streams brought you down. I could be there when you land. This fantasy of being able to be together when you're separated by taking a leap from America to the UK. It's quite a lovely, beautiful sentiment. I think it finds a sort of nice metaphorical way to be talking about long-distance relationships. But the rule is you should always be worried when rock stars start releasing songs about long-distance relationships, because it means that they've lost touch with everything except the touring life, and the song ideas might be drying up. They can only sing about missing people while being on tour. Perhaps explaining why they felt the need to take a break before going into their third album. We'll see whether that break was worth it when Ulysses comes out in January 2009. But by then, of course, indie music will have gone in a very different direction. And that's going to be sort of unfair to them, because I think in some ways Franz Ferdinand get lumped in and blamed for the landfill indie, even though their first two albums are so much more superior to basically every band that follows in their footsteps. A story, of course, that we've been tracking ever since Take Me Out came out in 2004. So well worth listening back to our previous episodes, everything before mid-2005, over on the Patreon. You can check out now. As we close this week's bargain bin and head into the top 30 with tracks still to come from Chris Brown, McFly, Red Hot Chili Peppers and Sean Paul. The next new entry we're going to be talking about is at number 23, so let's quickly count down the songs leading up to that. Masquerada, Sergio Mendes and Black Eyed Peas at
29.
Shane Ward taking a 14-place drop in his second week with Stand By Me.
28.
Will you stay?
A pretty bad drop, lumped on top of the fact that it was a particularly bad chart position to begin with suggests that Shane Ward's career is very much over. It's a big surprise that he ends up releasing a successful second album. I think basically so many people had so much riding on the X Factor because Steve Brookstein had sort of completely flopped. I think Simon Cowell knew that if they didn't push the next winner, it would make the show look really shit. It would basically be The Voice. So I think he got a level of chances that future X Factor contestants post Leona Lewis doing amazingly well, they just wouldn't get. Like when Leon Jackson's career flops, they're like, oh, it doesn't really matter because we've got Leona Lewis. They didn't have that when Shane Ward was launching his career. So he very fortunate to be the second winner. I don't think he would have got a second album had he not been.
27.
Supermassive Black Hole, the song that Bullet for My Valentine beat to Kerrang's Single of the Year.
26.
MyMyMy by Armand van Helden.
25.
Is Snow Patrol with Chasing Cars, but we can't lay here and just forget the world this week. That song we'll be talking about in next week's episode.
If I lay here.
24.
From Paris to Berlin by Infernal. That's 15 weeks on the chart. That's starting to emerge as a potential 20-week clubber. Wouldn't be that much of a surprise, seeing as it was the second biggest selling song of 2006.
My heart is pumping for love.
And at 23 is the next new entry we're going to be talking about, the infernal combination of Chris Brown and Lil Wayne with their Gimme That remix.
23.
Chris Brown's lowest charting single so far, following Run It and Yo Excuse Me Miss. A disappointing chart placement, but far from the end of Chris Brown's career. He has 2 number ones to come. But we've talked a lot about Chris Brown this year, so let's talk a little bit about Lil Wayne. It's not the first time he's popped up on this chart. This is actually his second appearance on the UK chart. He was credited on Destiny's Child's Soldier back in February 2005. Lil Wayne, I think, a huge figure of the 2010s, but he will actually never manage a top 10 as the lead artist in the UK, but he was fairly reliable for a time as a featured artist. His peak on this chart as a featured artist was number 3, which he managed with Jay Sean's Down. Lil Wayne had wanted nothing more than to be a rapper from a very young age. At the age of 11, he met the co-founder of Cash Money Records, Brian Birdman Williams, and he would basically keep sending him answer phone messages of him rapping until he gave him a record deal. However, when Lil Wayne's mother objected to her son being a rapper, Lil Wayne actually shot himself in the chest. For years, he said it was an accident, but he would later say that he'd attempted suicide because he couldn't imagine not making music as a career. So he makes his debut at the age of 12, goes platinum at the age of 17 as a member of the Hot Boys, and then quickly becomes a solo artist. His first solo album to make the top 10 of the Billboard album charts comes in 1999. It will be in 2008 where he gets his biggest success, including a US number 1 with the track Lollipop. He was making a claim to be the best rapper in the world with a series of hugely critically acclaimed mixtapes. Basically, any room that he was in for a long period of time, he would set a microphone up in and would just endlessly spit rhymes. As Stereogum put it, even when he appeared half-conscious, Wayne was coming up with jaggedy, brilliant little gems that he barely understood himself, verses that he would immediately forget after recording. This led to his 2008 album The Carter 3 selling 1 million copies in its first week, a feat that nobody thought was possible in the download era. It hadn't been done since 50 Cent managed it in 2005. Not that the road to this success was always easy. He was shot in the chest again in 2003 by a female fan who got angry when he stopped her from getting onto his tour bus. And so ultimately, I think that it's probably fair to say that if Lil Wayne represents everything interesting about hip-hop, the constant creativity, the sort of independently releasing music, Chris Brown represents everything that's lame about it. And so it's interesting that they are here together on this song. They end up in a very weird and gross attempt at outdoing each other in the press. After Lil Wayne revealed that he lost his virginity at age 11, Chris Brown had to double down on it and say that he lost his virginity at the age of 8, which, if he meant as a brag, it's the most harrowing, tragic brag that anyone has ever given, I would say. And I don't really want to dwell on that, so let's move on. Lil Wayne won't have a solo hit until April 2008. Chris Brown will be back in November 2007, so we're getting a little break from both. We have to talk about another big hip-hop adjacent star of the era. Here at number
22.
is Sean Paul. It's Sean Paul. Why did that sound so Irish when I did it? Oh, it's my friend Sean Paul. Oh, he's got the right temperature, so he does. It's Sean Paul. New entry. Never gonna be the same.
Take another step toward my destiny.
This is his lowest charting song so far, ever since the first time that the track Gimme the Light was released and made it to number 32 in 2002, although when that song was re-released, it eventually made the top 5. This is the 4th of 5 singles he released from this album. He's not letting the fact that it's 3 in a row of those singles now that have missed the top 10. That's not stopping him from keeping to release them. It's especially weird that he keeps releasing singles when they're not working in the UK and they were released ages ago in the US. This was released way back in August 2005 on the US charts. This was something we talked about with Kelly Clarkson recently, I think, didn't we? What is the point? All of your fans have already illegally downloaded it when it came out in the US. What is the point of releasing it as a single months later in the UK? Around this time, there's a sense that Sean Paul is starting to get a little tired of his sort of party man reputation. In interviews, he was saying that for his next album, he would move away from the party-orientated songs like We Be Burning and Temperature and release an album about youth violence in Jamaica. Although, as his Wikipedia points out, the final version of the album largely consisted of up-tempo party tracks. Definitely the record company having their say there and being like, no, we're not going to throw away this gravy train just because you have a social conscience. Not, of course, that he wasn't already trying to smuggle these themes into his work, We Be Burning, as we discussed when that came out, being about legalising weed. And this being a tribute to loved ones in his life he'd known who had died, including the reggae artist Daddy Gone, who was murdered in Kingston in 2005, and his teenage girlfriend Nicole Winter, of whom he said to The Guardian, "In my teens, having a girlfriend was a big thing. I'd have one break up. I'd have another, we'd break up. I don't know if you could call it infidelity at the boyfriend-girlfriend stage, but in my late teens, that's what led to the breakups. When I was 14 to 15, though, my first girlfriend, Nicole Winter, was the whole love and marriage thing, what you'd call puppy love. We go to the movies, start necking, find out stuff. After we broke up, we remained close friends, but sadly, when we were both 17, she passed away with a brain tumour. I sing about her in the song Never Gonna Be the Same, and there's a picture of her in the video. When she got sick, I just didn't know how to react. I always feel bad that I wasn't there for her in the last stages, but I couldn't handle seeing her like that. After she died, I saw her in 1 or 2 dreams and she was okay, smiling at me. I felt better after that. She was special to me." So this is a touching tribute to his friend, but I particularly enjoyed, this is the same Guardian interview that quote was from, Sean Paul's touching tribute to the UK, because I love so much all of the stuff about Busta Rhymes being in Morecambe. It was fun to hear Sean Paul talk about his grandmother, who was from Coventry. Coventry, of course, one of the worst hit cities during World War II. She once came up from the air raid shelter to find that every single building in her street, apart from 3, including the one she lived in, had been destroyed. So she moves to Rugby to work drawing plane parts during the war, at which point she meets a Jamaican guy who was studying in England, leads to them moving back to Jamaica, becoming Sean Paul's grandmother. He says of her, "In my teens, she would cook me English food such as bubble and squeak. She told me that fish and chips are the best when served in a newspaper smothered in vinegar when the print comes off on your hands. When she told me stories about England, it always seemed so far away and we didn't have the money to go there. But when I first went to Brixton, it was just like Jamaica. Spicy food and music." One of the things he did with the money he made from his success, she'd always dreamt of going to the pyramids in Egypt, and he was finally able to take her there. Hopefully he'll be able to make more of his grandmother's dreams come true when he releases another track in November, the track When You Gonna Give It Up To Me, which for some reason actually charted higher in 2026 than it ever did in 2006, because TikTok is a weird place to be. In the meantime, though, we'll get another different person called Sean Paul on these charts in September. And that's all I'm going to say about that for now. The mystique, eh? But we've got to head into the top 20.
21.
Who Knew by Pink, 9 weeks for that.
'Cause you said forever.
The top 20.
And our first track in the top 20 is Valerie by the Zootons. 6 weeks down from number 15.
20.
Why don't you come on over, Valerie?
We have new entries left from Red Hot Chili Peppers and McFly, as well as Snow Patrol and Christina Aguilera, but we'll be talking about those tracks next week.
19.
It's World Hold On Children of the Sky by Bob Sinclar.
Hold on.
18.
It's Christina Aguilera's Ain't No Other Man. We're going to be talking about that song in 7 days, by which I mean that we'll meet this song on Monday, we'll take it for a drink on Tuesday, we'll be making love by Wednesday, and on Thursday and Friday and Saturday, and we'll chill on Sunday.
Do your
17.
Automatic with Monster. That has been terrorising these charts for 2 months now. Ahead of it, our second highest new entry this week is courtesy of the Red Hot Chili Peppers, Tell Me Baby.
16.
Tell me, baby, what's your story?
Red Hot Chili Peppers have never managed to get 2 top 10 hits in a row so far. The closest they got was in 2002 when their number 2 hit By the Way was followed up with the number 11 track Zephyr Song. This, of course, following up from the number 2 Danny California. We've talked a little bit about the Red Hot Chili Peppers story in the past, but worth slightly recapping it. So their original guitarist John Frusciante left the band in 1992. They sort of drifted around for a few years, couldn't really make music without him. Meanwhile, he was very heavily addicted to heroin. He eventually comes back to the band in 1998, cleans up, and they release 3 incredibly critically acclaimed albums in a row, of which this is the 3rd, Stadium Arcadium. Their previous album, By the Way, had been a sort of fractious one for them, because sort of John Frusciante, as he's getting cleaner, is really coming into his own as a guitarist, but that leads the Chili Peppers bassist Flea feeling very sidelined, and so they try to sort that with this album, which is a 38-track double album, so there is plenty of space for John Frusciante's melody-focused guitar songs and Flea's funkier bass tracks. And this song sort of brings together both of them. It has these funky verses and this smoother, more melodic chorus. John Frusciante tried many ways of getting off heroin, none of which I'm sure your doctor would recommend. This is The Guardian again. I tried it by just smoking pot and drinking. I tried to quit by taking speed and other stuff, then smoking crack and just taking heroin occasionally. I tried it by shooting coke. I knew I was going to die. I was positive I would be dead if I kept on taking drugs. So I tried it without doing any drugs at all. I thought, let's see what happens in a year. If it still feels like the world is against you and people don't want you, you can go back on drugs and you can die. In the meantime, the band has had 7 guitarists. John Frusciante has spent £70,000 on dental surgery due to his teeth falling out from the drug abuse. And Frusciante has OD'd and been medically dead 5 times. Incredibly lucky to be alive. No wonder his music is so full of the joys of living in 2006. Much of which can be heard in Tell Me Baby. Anthony Kiedis, the lead singer of the Red Hot Chili Peppers, said, "This is about the river of humans that flow into Hollywood. It reflects the dreams and ultimate disillusion of thousands of pilgrims who moved to LA seeking fame and fortune." This is one of the 38 songs they recorded for this album. They'd originally really wanted to do a short, streamlined album of 11 to 12 songs, which didn't work out. This instead having this huge outpouring of creativity, which sadly for the band cannot last. And by 2008, John Frusciante has left the band again. He said that he wanted to focus on his own solo electronic music and didn't sort of want the trappings of fame and fortune. Throughout my time in the band, I was very excited about exploring the musical possibilities inherent in a rock band, and doing so with these people in particular. A couple of years ago, I began to feel that same excitement again, but this time it was about making a different kind of music alone. Over the last 12 years, I've changed as a person and artist to such a degree that to do further work along the lines I did with the band would be to go against my own nature. I just really don't want to do all this living in this world of fame and publicity. I just want to concentrate on making electronic music and making music just to make music and not to make people happy, not to be successful. He also said that he was feeling quite mentally unbalanced from their sort of big touring schedule, including a increasing interest into the occult, which he worried was just as dangerous as the heroin had been. He, however, did eventually rejoin the band in 2019. He was at Flea's house in which Flea, out of the blue, started saying about how much he missed playing with John and started crying. When he said it, John realised that he missed playing with Flea too, and so he joined the band for, hopefully, the final time. All that in the future, though. They'll be back in November with the track Snow Hey-O, which will unofficially kick off the Christmas period, I guess, in November. So that leaves us with one new entry still remaining on this chart. McFly's Don't Stop Me Now and Please Please. If it gets to number 1, it will be their 5th number 1 following 5 Colours in Her Hair. Obviously, I'll Be Okay and All About You. There's also 3 songs that were released last week on downloads alone that we need to keep an eye on as we move up this chart, all of which have a chance to knock Lily Allen off the top spot. They are Smiley Faces by Gnarls Barkley, of course, their follow-up to the biggest selling song of the year, Crazy. Unfaithful by Rihanna. She's had 2 number 2 hits with Ponder Replay and SOS. She'll be hoping to do one better this time. Also, You Give Me Something by James Morrison, very much being pitched as the next James Blunt. Will he be able to manage James Blunt's chart success and get himself a number 1 single? All will be revealed as we head into the top 10, which is 5 places away. First, Buttons by the Pussycat Dolls.
15. 14.
Neo with Sexy Love.
13.
She Moves in Her Own Way by the Kooks, their second appearance on this chart.
12.
They were slagging off the Kooks on this show just a few weeks ago, so they probably felt good to be beating them by 1 place here at 12. In their month on the chart, Razorlight with In the Morning. Which will take us to the album chart, in which Razorlight are the winners of one of the hardest fought weeks on the album chart of the entire year. Their second album, the eponymous Razorlight, is at number 1, beating not only Lily Allen's debut, All Right Still, but the first album of Paolo Nutini, These Streets. I personally was buying Lily Allen's album, which I bought the week it came out and listened to all summer. It will never make it to number 1, but it will spend nearly a year in the album charts, and let's celebrate that with a little piece of music from it. This is from Not Big. And if you want to hear a slightly longer version of that clip, and indeed clips from all of the songs we talk about on this show, that is part of the Patreon package that you can check out over on Patreon or on my website, the2000schartshow.wordpress.com.
11.
Is I Love My Chick with Busta Rhymes dropping out of the top 10 in its third week.
I love my girl cause she knows she the shit.
The top 10.
With McFly, Gnarls Barkley, Rihanna and James Morrison all fighting to knock Lily Allen off the top spot. Falling at the first hurdle is Gnarls Barkley. This was should have been a number 1 last week. It's Smiley Faces.
10.
But you keep on smiling for me.
Oh, which reminds me, this week's
Song that should have been this week
is Ain't No Other Man by Christina Aguilera, but we're not talking about it until next week. Chartwatch blog said of Smiley Faces, whilst you could be forgiven for expecting the follow-up to the year's biggest seller Crazy to perform just a little better, the fact that the album has sold so well was almost certain to have an impact. Add in the fact that OK, maybe the aforementioned bestseller is their best track by some distance, and it kind of becomes clear that number 10 is about as good as Smiley Faces is going to get. And I couldn't disagree more. This song is so much better than Crazy for me, but it seems I'm alone in that opinion, just as much as I'm alone in this very hot studio. Any podcast production studio that wants to buy us and pay for someone to fan me as I rant about the noughties, I'm very much open for offers. Anyway, Paolo Nutini doing well on the album chart and sticking in the top 10 with Last Request at
9.
Grant my last request and just let me hold you.
That's now been on this chart for a month. A former number 1 is here at number
8.
13th week on the chart for Sandy Tom with I Wish I Was a Punk Rocker. Another contender for the 20-week club there, I think.
Flowers in my hair.
I have to talk about this song a little bit. I want to talk about one line of this song that rubbed me the wrong way last week and led me into a wormhole. It's the line when
Not everybody drove a car.
because I thought, well, probably quite a lot of people drove cars in like 77 and 69, right? And in fact, that is true. 1967 is actually the year when we go from the minority of Britain owning cars to the majority. And indeed, you know, when I talk about Sandy Tom on social media, you get a lot of comments from people who are like, oh, punk rockers didn't have flowers in their hair. Like, that's so stupid. I understand what she means by that. It's obviously she's talking about two eras here. She's talking about the 60s and the 70s, and she's sort of combining them into this one image that she sort of just wished she was in these times where music really mattered, as she said. And she sees the hippie era and the punk era as two different versions of that she's bringing together in this song. So I think it's obvious what she means there. But when she says not everybody drove a car, while it is true that the percentage of people with no car does decrease year on year, basically from 1951 to 2007, the amount of families who have one car is 45% by 1967, and it pretty much stays there for 40 years. So basically, as many people owned a car in the late 60s as they did in the mid-2000s. The only difference was that the percentage of people who owned more than one car increased year on year. But that's not what she said. She didn't say, when the head of state didn't play guitar, not everybody had two cars. she says that not everybody drove a car. And actually, the number of people who drive a car has stayed pretty much consistent from the 60s to the 2000s. It's almost like the lyrics to I Wish I Was a Punk Rocker with flowers in my hair. Hold up to no scrutiny whatsoever. It's almost like that. So yes, that was what I did this week. Looked at a lot of percentages about car ownership in Britain in the 60s and 70s. So doesn't that make you want to make your own podcast? Doesn't that sound like fun and not a terrible way to enjoy your life when you could be like in a field having a tinny? I'll leave that for you to decide for yourself as I move on to number 7, Nelly Furtado, another former number 1. Been on the chart for 2 months now. That's Man Eater.
7.
Voodoo Child by Rogue Traders is at
6.
And that song has literally fed into my dreams. I had a dream on Sunday about seeing the Rogue Traders in concert, but missing their track Voodoo Child because I was in the toilet. Again, maybe that's my subconscious trying to tell me that I'm missing life in the 2020s by spending all this time thinking about the 2000s. But that's definitely not enough to make me stop subconscious. Fuck you. We have to talk about James Morrison, who's at number
5.
Up from 27 last week with his track You Give Me Something.
Give me something.
Chartwatch blog again said of this, witnessing the presence of such a single such as this in the top 5 gives you hope for the future. Sure, it is derivative, but it oozes quality from the first note to the last. And again, I mean, we love the Chartwatch blog on this show. They give us many interesting things to talk about, but I could not disagree with them more. Give me the bizarrest novelty tracks in the world that are at least fresh over this warmed over white soul any day of the week. This is pure sincerity slop, and I'll have no part of it. The 2026 is rotten with this stuff, and it all starts here. And indeed, the race for the number 1 single all starts here because last week's number 1 has dropped to number 4, leaving the top spot very much open. Smile by Lily Allen here.
4.
Basically, people deciding to buy the album rather than continuing to buy the single, meaning that McFly could very much soon be the first song to go straight in at number 1 on these charts since Crazy back in, March? Very different from the charts we talked about in 2003, 4 and 5. And very fascinating. Another former number 1 is at number 3 this week. That is Shakira and Wyclef Jean's Hips Don't Lie. That might not be at number 1 on these charts, but it is managing its 3rd week at number 1 on the download charts this week. But of course, it can never go back to number 1 on this single chart, can it? Leave that hanging in the air.
3.
My hips don't lie, and I'm starting to feel it's right.
We have a two-way battle for number 1. Rihanna's came in at number 16 last week with Unfaithful, and McFly coming straight in to the top 5. Which one of them has made it to number 1? Well, speaking of Unfaithful, the British record buying public has been unfaithful to Rihanna.
2.
Happy with some other guy.
McFly have got the 1038th UK number 1 with their double A side of Don't Stop Me Now by Queen and their original track, Please Please. Let's hear one of them now. This is Please Please, he says as he rustles about in his bag to plug in his laptop.
1.
Sad for Rihanna not to make the top spot, but we don't need to worry about her, of course. She does have 9 number 1 singles to come. But let's talk about McFly, who, you maybe have wondered where our stinker of the week is. For the first time, a number 1 single is our stinker of the week.
Stinker of the week.
Look, I'm sorry, I know it's for charity, and I'm sure it made lots of good money for Sport Relief, which is a worthy cause, but covering Don't Stop Me Now by Queen is the laziest and most predictable thing that McFly, whose songs I like generally, could have done. When you bear in mind that their last charity single was All About You, which led them to new musical heights, this is just a huge disappointment. Sells 36,000 copies to get it to number 1. So they are getting it to number 1, but with the lowest selling number 1 of the entire year. And the lowest selling by a long way. This is the 89th biggest selling song of the year. The nearest number 1 to that, not by McFly, is Westlife's The Rose, which is the 62nd highest selling song of the year. So it's a full 20 places lower. But bringing them back to number 1 after their last single only could make it to number 9, but was a great track in the form of Ultraviolet. This, of course, is their original song Please Please and a cover of Don't Stop Me Now, the original of which made it to number 9 back in 1979. So far, all of their number 1s have come in pairs, So we'll see whether Stargirl can continue that trend in November. But let's talk about Please Please, because it is, well, a lot of people say rumoured to be about Lindsay Lohan, but they literally say the name Lindsay in it. It's about a woman with red hair and green eyes, and in the video they have a nurse who has a name tag that says Lindsay Albright, and Lindsay Lohan's character in Just My Luck, which McFly were in, let's not forget, is Ashley Albright. In the album notes for their album Motion in the Ocean, they say it's not about Lindsay Lohan, but once they realised they weren't getting sued, they changed their tune, saying that it was their manager who convinced them to make direct, explicit reference to Lindsay Lohan in this track. We talked about it before, but worth repeating this great story. Harry Judd did nearly have a one-night stand with Lindsay Lohan on the set of their film Just My Luck. We drove to the restaurant, but we hadn't even walked in before Lindsay started reeling off to me all the Hollywood A-listers she'd been with before explaining that she preferred older men. As we sat and ate, she told us all these stories, graphic stories about her sex life, enough to put us off our stakes. Lindsay grabbed me by the hand and followed me into a bathroom, then she shut the door behind us. As I turned around, she lunged at me. This was quite full on, and it lasted for quite some time. They were about to get with it in their hotel room, unfortunately ruined by Danny, who drunkenly burst into the room just as they were about to have sex. For a while, Lindsay and I started getting a bit frisky, but gradually she started to sober up. "You've got to leave before 8, she said. I didn't really want to leave, we had unfinished business. And then this is the iconic bit where you said how iconic this was the first time we talked about it, but again bears repeating. But then she announced she was tired, pulled on one of those airplane eye masks over her eyes and went to sleep. So much for my romantic night of passion. Hey, you got a number 1 out of it. So it's more than Lindsay Lohan did with her own musical career, which I think peaked at number 27 or so. As for Don't Stop Me Now, a top 10 hit in the UK, but a commercial disappointment in the US where it could only make it to number 86. It is really only in more recent years that it became a song that was considered one of Queen's classics. Most people say that it was its use in the film Shaun of the Dead that brought it to a whole new audience, which has led in 2005, Top Gear viewers called it the greatest driving song ever. And then in 2023, a survey of 2,000 motorists found it was their favourite car sing-along song, beating Dancing Queen by ABBA and Living on a Prayer by Bon Jovi. Readers of Rolling Stone called it the 3rd best ever Queen song. And when I read that, I was going to make a joke of, obviously, number 1 is Fat Bottom Girls, because the idea was it would be so absurd that that stupid-ass song was considered as one of Queen's best songs. So I thought that would be funny. Then I looked at the list and it was number 2. Rolling Stone readers clearly have taken a few Rolling Stones to the brain. Bohemian Rhapsody, of course, number 1 on that list. Brian May from Queen told Mojo that he struggles with the lyrics of this one because it reminds him of a time in Freddie Mercury's life when he was taking lots of drugs and having sex with lots of men. And it sort of reminds me about one of the annoying things about Queen. Again, this is my opinion, it may be unfair, but I really get this impression that the other 3 members of Queen would have been so much happier if Freddie Mercury wasn't gay. Like, it was really nothing but an inconvenience to them, and they've never, like, any time he does anything gay, they're like, oh, we didn't really like that. And that's why I can't really see them as gay rights, if I'm honest. Although I do appreciate Brian May this week for throwing some ultimate shade at McFly, sort of unknowingly. So he did the enemy segment, Does Rock Kill Brain Cells, which is a cool segment I would recommend you reading. They basically will ask people sort of questions about their own career and see if they can sort of remember things that happened. And so they asked Brian May, who covered Queen's Don't Stop Me Now for Sport Relief 2006? Clue, you performed it with them at one of their London gigs. And he can't remember the name of the band. Although he did say very good boys they are too. When we were going around the world getting hits, we'd think everybody covers the Beatles and Led Zeppelin. Why don't they cover Queen songs? And then there was a trickle that suddenly became an avalanche, and suddenly we became part of the language that people wanted to speak in music. Hearing people playing our songs is the greatest compliment. I think you have to be really ready to receive compliments from the universe if you think that the 5 version of We Will Rock You is a compliment to that track. But there we go. By the way, if you want to hear me talk about that song a little bit more, it's one of the songs we talk about in my ranking of all of the number 1 hits of 2000, which is over on our Patreon now. There's been a sort of reappraisal of McFly in more recent years as sort of a serious rock band that's sort of worthy of interest. They certainly weren't seen like that in the mid-2000s, because Sabian called them a pop band for kids. Daniel Radcliffe said that the worst thing about his fellow schoolmates was that they didn't listen to the Libertines and listen to McFly instead. But I listened to this and I have to agree with them. No serious band would release a cover of Don't Stop Me Now. I think McFly are capable of some great songs. I think 5 Colours in Her Hair, Room on the Third Floor, All About You, all fantastic songs. This, a huge problem for me. Also, it just further highlights that McFly get number 1s not because, they sell loads and loads of copies. They sell them because they're really tactical and sneaky about when they release tracks. So their number ones will always be some of the lowest selling of the entire year. And there's something that rubs me the wrong way about that. But we have to give it to them. They have this week's number one from 20 years ago. Seeing as it is the lowest selling number one of next week, I would say that leaves the number one spot next week wide open. We'll see whether, talking about Kasabian, whether Kasabian can get to number one next week, or Madonna. Paris Hilton is releasing her first track, The Amazing Stars Are Blind. Pet Shop Boys are back. And of course, we'll be talking about Chasing Cars, Ain't No Other Man, and Tell Me Why by Supermode, all of which have a big chance of also getting a number one hit. And of course, let's not count out Hips Don't Lie, which is still doing very well on the download charts. But surely, after 3 weeks away from the top, can't go back to number one, right? I'll leave that question hanging as you hear this week's number one from 20 years ago. See you next week. This is Don't Stop Me Now by McFly.
Gonna make a supersonic man out of you.